Hey everyone, welcome to this video. So we're going to be driving through the outback in Australia, and because there's not a lot of fuel stations on the way, we put in a spare tank under our car to extend our range. Now we want to give a big thank you to King's Wreckers, their link is in the description below, for getting us all the parts that we needed, especially the fuel tank. If you guys are in the Brisbane, Logan area, definitely go check them out. The guys are super fair and they can help you out with any parts that you need. Also, the other problem on the Sprinters is that the fuel sender has 3 taps. So the fuel in, the fuel return, and the auxiliary tap. And the auxiliary tap is actually used by the auxiliary heater. So we had to figure out a way to put in a T-piece so we don't have to cut the line of the auxiliary heater. So hope this video helps you guys. So you're going to want to clean out the inside of the tank, make sure all the petrol is out, the gas, because we're using this for diesel. So soapy water always works the magic. I've sprayed some soapy water in here already, and now I can use either the shower setting here, just go around and spray everything down, or I like to use this angle setting, which means it actually sprays at an angle, which helps you get the top of the tank. So you just stick it in here, and now you can spray down the top of the tank like that. And then once you've got a little bit of soapy water in there, like it is right now, you can just take the tank and just give it a bit of a shake. And that should help get everything clean and all the leftover gas and petrol out of this. So you can put diesel in it. Make sure you get all of the water out before you put any diesel in this, because you don't want water in your diesel. That will kill your engine and your injectors and everything in your car pretty much. So use a little rag, put some soap on it, and then just wipe down the inside. Now you can look in there, I've already wiped down the top part, and you can see how much dirt is still left in there, how much you get off of those walls just by wiping it down with a little cloth. So I've let this dry for a few days just to make sure all the water is out. I put some soap, took the fuel pump out, put it in a bucket of soapy water and pumped soapy water through the fuel pump a couple of times. Also make sure you let that dry and let the water come out of the actual hose itself as well. Got the connectors cleaned, I've tried the fuel pump, so now it's just time. Get your fuel line, get your connectors, hook everything back up, and then we can go install it. So I've attached the electrical connectors for both sides. That's only a level sensor, and this one's for the fuel pump. Now I'm going to connect the hose, and make sure that if you're not using the original hose, which is actually glued onto these connectors, so I'm using an 8mm hose here that I just put onto this barb. It's just a normal barb end. I'll show you what it looks like later on a different one. And now make sure you always hose clamp these down, because they're not actually fitted for these. This one's actually on there really tight, but you don't want to take any chances. You are talking about flammable liquids here, so be safe. Make sure you'd rather have more safety than not enough safety. So once this is on, also when you're putting this on, remember, if you ever have to get to this, it's probably easiest to put it on in a direction where you can actually get to it. So in this direction, that direction. So when you're mounting your tank, we got the tank mounts with our tank. It's easy to use, it's easier to figure out what material you need when you're mounting the tank just by comparing these two. So as you can see, width-wise, this is exactly the same, and also in thickness, it's the same. So we're still going to go overboard and add a few more So this tank was only held down by 2 of these mounts. We're going to use at least 3. And we're going to use some big bolts. These are M8. It's always important to use big bolts because you don't know the dynamic forces that are involved when the tank is full and you're going over bumps in the road. You want to make sure you're using over-dimensioned parts. So we're using M8. These are, I had a guy tell me once while I was doing an internship, you can literally pull or tow a tank with M8 screws. So M8s are pretty good. If you want to use M10s, you can use M10s, but then it's harder to drill holes for them. So if you don't know what size hole you want to drill, you don't want to drill an 8mm hole for an 8mm screw. Don't ask me how I know that. So you want to put your screw into these pretty much the holes where you have your drill bits, and if it fits in there pretty easily, then you're good. That's what the washers are for. You're allowed to make a little bit of a bigger hole, so I'm making an 8.5 hole for M8 screw. If you don't know the sizes of screws, it's always easy to just stick them into these holes and see what kind of screw you have, so you can use that drill bit to make the right holes. So now we're going to drill the holes for the mounting band. Make sure you wear eye protection for this, not like me. And we have these profiles that we're drilling these holes into. I wouldn't recommend drilling into the frame unless you absolutely have to. These profiles are out of aluminum. They're like X-rod profiles, but we don't have the inserts, so just going to drill right through them and should be sturdy enough to hold this small tank. There we go. Now we can just stick our screw through there and put the mounting band on. Make sure you vacuum up these small chips because they will put a hole in your tire. Here you can see how these screws are already attached and tightened. Now we put the tank up, and since these bands are already in place, you just have to tighten them on the other side. Next, you want to position these pads to make sure that they pretty much touch the top of where you're installing the tank. So I've attached mine to this because this is actually the point that touches the top of the floorboard. Now make sure you attach your filler hose and your breather hose before you put the tank under the car. This is our second time doing this. So we've jacked the tank up under this block of wood and our spare jack just so we can fit these straps now. I've already attached them on one end and now we've got to attach them to the other. So it's always easier to attach them to the end where you can't get to after, or when the tank is up. So these ones are really hard to get to, so I've just tightened them up, and now I'm just going to tighten them and put them on the other end right here. So after jacking up the tank yesterday, we put these straps on it, attach them up here. You can just barely fit your hand past these right here, and then you can tighten up the bolts. Now we've put one here and one in the back where the stock ones were, and we added one across right here just for extra support, and we left the option open of being able to put one more along here, so right here all the way to the back. We'll have to see how the tank behaves, and then we'll see if we have to connect that. And we pretty much screwed it into the beams going across this way. So we've attached a fuel filler hose to the fuel inlet. Make sure you use fuel filler hose for this duty. You don't want to use anything else because the diesel or petrol might actually corrode away at the plastic, causing it to pretty much gel inside of your fuel, and then it'll just completely clog up your fuel filter, or if you don't have a fuel filter, it'll clog up your fuel pump, and that would not be good. So if you can, try doing this without loops. There just wasn't enough space here to be able to do this without this loop, and there's one more in the back. So we ran the line all the way past the tank, here past the tank, and then it pretty much just runs all the way back to the back box, and we'll show you what it looks like there. So So this is our back storage compartment, and this is where the filler hose ends. This is a 38mm diameter filler hose. Just attach it with a hose clamp to a joiner, and then use the original clamp and the original hose from the car that we got the tank out of, along with the original filler neck. And you just open this up, put your diesel in there, and down it goes into the tank. Some recommendations: plan this out beforehand. This is version 3 or 4 of this filler configuration here, and if you can, always have this hose running downhill. You don't want to have any loops, so this has a loop. We're at the fill inlet of the tank, and right here, as you can see, but it's not possible to do it any other way, so it runs up in a loop over the wheel arch as well. So there's 3 loops here in places that go uphill, so that you can only fill this really slowly. So if you want to avoid that, make sure it goes downhill the whole time until it gets to the tank. That way you can fill it up quickly. And yeah, this just isn't possible here because this surface right here is actually lower than the top of the tank. And we have attached the fuel hose to the fuel filter, which is attached to the back of the box with a pipe clamp, 50mm diameter. And you don't want to use a zip tie here to tie this up because it can actually wear down the hose. So what you can use in place of the zip ties are these water type connectors. They look like this, and then you can clamp them down. That way you don't put any wear onto the fuel line, and then eventually it'll leak out fuel, which would not be good. Now we're gonna add the thread seal tape to make sure we have a fuel tight connection between this T-piece and the solenoid, which is this one. When we put this on, you always want to put it on in the direction as to if you put it on, when you tighten this up, it pulls the thread seal tape tight and doesn't loosen it or take it off again. And because we don't want the thread seal tape to get into the fuel, because that would be pretty bad if that gets into the fuel and then the fuel filter has to work more to get it out, we're just going to leave 1 or 2 threads of distance to the front, just to make sure that anything that gets scratched or so when we start threading it on there, and that it doesn't knock anything loose and get into the fuel. So wrap it around once, twice. I'm going to do 3 actually, and then thread seal tape you just rip off. There you go. And now we can screw it into our solenoid and make sure you've got the right flow direction. So this is our flow direction. That's how we want to put this in. Now we're just going to thread this on here. Notice how the thread seal tape is now being pulled tight and not getting loosened off by the solenoid. Now we're going to put thread seal on this. It's a 1/4 inch barb. It's a 1/4 inch thread to an 8mm barb. Make sure you're leaving the last thread or 2 without the thread seal tape, just to make sure you don't get it into the fuel. Now you're going to screw it into the other end of the solenoid. Go. So I've drilled my mounting hole right here for the pipe clamp for the solenoid, because it's also got a round housing that you can put a nice pipe clamp onto. So I've also started to put the hose onto the T-piece, which then goes to the solenoid. The solenoid is a normally open solenoid, so normally fuel can flow in from this direction into here, through here, and to the, this is gonna go to the diesel heater, so the auxiliary heater, and this is the fuel line to the spare tank. So since it's normally open, it'll only close when you turn on the power to the fuel pump on the other tank, which will then keep the diesel heater from being swamped and diesel flooding out of that and not filling up our tank. I've also added the 8mm quick connect, fuel line quick connector. This piece right here to the last bit of fuel hose, and I always put hose clamps on these. It's a good test is just to pull on these as hard as you can, and this one isn't budging, which is good because these hoses are flexible and they're not necessarily meant for these type of connectors, since normally these connectors have hose pieces glued on here so they don't come back off or heat shrinked on there. So make sure you use pipe clamps just to keep it on there nice and snug. So this is the male 8mm fuel quick connector. I've also put a hose clamp on this end. This end is just 8mm barbed end. Also put a hose on here, give this a nice pull, see that it doesn't come out. I chose to go with this one because I didn't want to have to cut the KL1 fuel adapter for the auxiliary heater off. So I'm just going to connect it onto this 8mm barb or fuel quick connect male end, and that way I don't have to cut anything and I can just put that right on there. And now I'm going to connect the tube also onto the solenoid and T-piece, and then we should be able to install it all. Alrighty, so I've now mounted the solenoid, so that's the solenoid here, and if we look over here, this is the line to the auxiliary fuel tank. It goes up and over there, and then along the battery box down here, all the way down to the tank. And then we have this line right here, which actually goes to the auxiliary heater, so that's the male fuel quick connector. And the one from the top actually goes into the tank auxiliary port. So your Sprinter has 3 ports. I can attach a picture. I'll actually put up a picture quickly to show you which one's the auxiliary one. And if you already have the auxiliary heater attached, then it'll be opened. If not, you'll have to drill slightly into it just to open it. And I've already attached the main line to the fuel nipple, and now see if I can show this, but up there you can see that the main one is already attached, and that's the auxiliary that's going to go to the KL1 adapter. That's right there, and that one isn't completely fastened in there yet, but you can pretty much do this without dropping your tank. So you just reach in here, I'm doing this right now, try and get to the lines, and you can always use like a camera or something to see what you're doing at the beginning. So I'm trying to find the adapter here. And that's it right here. So these ones you just push down here and pop it on. Let's see. Doesn't want to work. And there we go. It's connected. So this is connected now. That's the auxiliary one right here. This one's connected to the secondary port. I'll give you
the auxiliary port there, and then it loops around, pretty much comes back to the solenoid or the T-piece, and then from there we've got, so this line is this one is the auxiliary to the heater. The one up there is the one that goes to the tank, and the one that goes this way is going to the other spare fuel tank. And so whenever I turn the switch, this solenoid would be energized, close this line off to make sure that not too much, so that the heater doesn't get any fuel pumped into it. Yeah, and you can do this pretty much without dropping your tank. You just work under the car, reach up there. I mean, all I did at the beginning was take one or two videos of my, like with my phone, put it up here, check and see where everything was, and then you just start working on it and you get a feel for it, where everything is, and you can pretty much do this without having to drop your tank, because our tank's full right now and that would have been a pain. And another thing is, make sure you're not putting any cable ties on these. Like I said before, it will wear the material off. So I've actually placed the solenoid and the fuel filter at very strategic positions to actually avoid clamping it at all. There are fuel clamps you can use. They look kind of like these clamps, that white one, but smaller for these lines. Or you can use, if you want to go cheap, use the plastic water hose clamps. They're like a U shape. I showed them earlier. Those will save you a bit of money. It works the same way. That's pretty much it. Now that it's all connected, just gotta wire it up, and because it's raining and it's dark, that's it for today. So let's quickly go over fuel connectors. So these are two male fuel connectors. This is a 10mm one and this is an 8mm one. These actually came off of these ones. Your Sprinter auxiliary one is a 8mm one, and your main lines are a 10mm one. So now going over the female adapters, they actually create a seal right here on this long end right here, and this end is just to keep it on there so it can't pop off. That's what these are for. So you push these in and then it pops right onto there. So this one goes onto that one. And for this one, it's a bit of a different system. They all have different systems. So this one, you snap this up and then you push this down, and as you can see, that's opening up just so you can pretty much slide it on there, and then you push this in, and then you can slide it over that part and it actually grabs on and won't come off. And the seal is created back here, and up here where this part is where it actually holds on to the adapter. Just so you can go over these are the barbed ends, just like any other old barbed end. This is like your KL1 tap adapter, so you just squeeze these and then it just pretty much goes right over these. Alright, so we have added a wire to the actual connector. You can see there it's just taped on. If you want to waterproof it, just put some silicone inside like this. Just put that in there and tape it shut. And then ran the wiring along here. It's a 2-core 1.5 square millimeter wire. I've used it when I was pumping out the soapy water. Just cable tied it to this harness. Make sure you're not using these zip ties on the fuel line, it can damage it. And then it just runs up here and into the box, and that's gonna go into the electrical compartment inside. It's just gonna go up there, and I'm gonna solder on the solenoid somewhere about right here, and then pull it all the way back up. Now I've put silicone on this connector right here, as you can see. Both of them, there's actually tape wrapped around the solder, and now I've put silicone around that, and now I'm going to wrap it again in tape. And once that dries, it should be a watertight connection. And this spot is actually more prone to water, which is why I was a bit worried about this one. So this one's gonna be real watertight. Now we've put the tape on here, just lightly wrapped it around the silicone part. Make sure you begin and end before and after where the silicone starts, because the tape won't stick to it. Make sure you overlap the tape to make sure that it can grip onto itself, and then you just kind of press these ends closed so you don't have any water getting like stuck up in there. Same on this side. And then you just put it where you wanted to have it. I wanted to have it right here. And now I can run the rest of my wiring from there to there and over into the box and solder it onto the 1.5 square mil cable. So I've gotten all the wires set up here. What you got to do is you pull these tight and you see where these go to. And that's where you pretty much take the insulation off of these. It's easier to do this with a cutting knife. You just kind of go around this once. For this wire, you don't want to go around it because you'll actually strip the insulation off the wires here. So if you want to take this outside insulation off, you actually go through the middle. So you cut into the middle down that way, and then you can peel it off. That way you don't damage the insulation on the inside wires, and then you can cause a short, which is not what you want. So now we're gonna solder these. So I'm gonna red to red and black to white. So red's always my positive. Try to stay consistent here, that way you don't accidentally solder it on the wrong way. And then we'll wrap each one individually with tape, and then we'll wrap the whole thing with tape. And because it's actually getting pulled into the body here, I don't need to waterproof it, which solves that hassle at least. So you're going to want to twist the wire around the part that you've taken the insulation off of right here. Just twist it around once, and then you can easily solder this. Make sure you get the solder in everywhere so it's nice and tight, because I am going to be pulling this through this gap up here. There's a gap, and I don't want this coming off again. This is what it looks like soldered. Make sure you got solder all the way around and you don't have any sharp pointy edges that can poke through the tape. So if you run your finger and you get poked, make sure you get rid of that. Now we have taped both sides individually, so there's still a gap in here. That way you don't cause a short. And now we're gonna tape this whole thing with white tape just to give it some more structural support, so we're not actually pulling on the solder when we pull it through the floor. Now we have a spliced wire. So we've got these two wires heading off to the solenoid, and this one is going off to the fuel pump. So when we flip the switch for the positive, both will come on at the same time. That's why the normally open solenoid will then close to protect the heater.
We like the idea of having a spare fuel tank better than having several jerry cans, because we didn't want to put them inside the van and then they're leaking and stuff like that. So we got one jerry can, but it's in an extra compartment outside, so it doesn't matter. And if you like this video, feel free to give us a like, subscribe, hit the bell so you get a notification every single time we upload a video, and follow us on Instagram at jp_adventures19. Stay tuned for more videos.